last Friday, my husband, he had flown into Singapore, where I'm currently living, from the United States, where he had been. We have 3 children living in the United States. And he had been over there seeing them. Our youngest son is 16. He had a spring break. And Andrew landed in on Wednesday morning. And on Thursday morning, he found himself not feeling great. I said, let's just check your fever. I honestly would never think to do that, except for the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And he had a fever, so he laid low. On Friday, the fever was higher and he had a cough. I said, why don't you go and check it out? And he was admitted to hospital and tested positive for coronavirus that day, 6 hours later. And he's been in hospital since then, since today is day 5, day 6, and he's been battling a fever with that. And this is a state of it's natural. It is just, I wouldn't be human if I didn't feel some anxiety and some overwhelm about the situation, and I have absolutely felt it. But I shared on my social media channels on Saturday what had happened, that Andrew was in hospital, and I just asked people to send prayers. And I've lived in Singapore for 2 years, but from across the world, because I've lived in the United States and I've lived in Australia. I am Australian. I'm currently living in Singapore. And I was I was in tears numerous times on Saturday. My heart just wide open in gratitude for the sense of the friendship and the community and the outpouring of love that was coming into me.
Welcome to the Gratitude Podcast on www.georgianbenta.com, where you'll hear a new story each week that will inspire more gratitude in your own life. Our mission is to inspire 100,000 people to discover how to feel gratitude and live a happy life through the amazing life stories of our successful guests and their actionable tips. And now, the host of our podcast, Georgian Benta.
Hi, Gratitude Seeker. Welcome to a new episode of the Gratitude Podcast. Today with us, we have someone that has been living on multiple continents around the world, and she has worked with organizations like Salesforce, British Telecom, NASA, Morgan Stanley, UN Foundation, Johnston Johnston, L'Oreal, Microsoft, SAP, and Deloitte. And she draws on her background in Fortune 500 business, coaching, and psychology to embolden people to lead themselves and others to better outcomes. Her name is Margie Warrell, and she's here with us today to talk about her new book and also the relationship between courage and gratitude. Margie, welcome to the Gratitude Podcast.
Thank you, Bento. And I must just say, as we begin, it's actually my name. It's the Australian pronunciation is Margie with a hard G.
Oh, Margie. Thank you so much.
That's okay.
All right, Margie. So, firstly, I wanted to ask you exactly this question. Like, what does courage have to do with gratitude? I personally believe that there is a really beautiful and interesting link between the two, but I'm really curious to hear your perspective.
Well, it's all about where we put our focus. And so courage, as you would know, courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in the presence of it. And it is when we're living in a state of gratitude, it's very hard to be living in a state of fear. When we're living in gratitude, it actually dissipates our fear because our attention and our focus is very present to all that we have, and rather than on all that we don't want to occur in the future. And so it's a very different state of mind. And so courage, I think actually it takes courage sometimes to shift our attention away from all that we don't want and all that we're afraid of what might happen, particularly in times like this right now when there's so much uncertainty around us, and to really bring our attention back to all that we do have and all that is within our control and the blessings in our lives. And it's very easy to be focused on all that's wrong and all that might go wrong. And I think it's in times like this when fear dials up, we have to be so much more intentional to really be focusing in on all that is right in our lives.
I love this perspective, and I can't help but correlate this with Hardwiring Happiness, the book that Rick Hansen wrote, in which he talks about how we have two modes of the brain. One is reactive and one is responsive. And when we practice gratitude, we get into the responsive mode of the brain, and we, instead of just reacting, we access more of our inner resources, and we're able to respond to things. And I think this is really interesting, and I know that you spoke a little bit about this as well in your talks.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that reactive mode, when we're focusing in on what scares us and we put our attention, we have fear hijacks our thinking, and it really kicks in that amygdala function, that fight, flight, freeze function. And so we react. And it's not always, then our actions aren't always the most rational actions, and they're often not actions that ultimately serve our highest well-being. Whereas responding is a more considered approach. It's when we're engaging that part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, where we're thinking through. Yes, we are very cognizant of the risks, and we're very aware of the dangers, but we're not. The fear, that emotion of fear, isn't calling the shots. And of course, so much of my work in the world is around helping people reclaim the power that we so often give to fear and give to anxiety and give to self-doubt, and really showing up in the world from a place of self-trust and from a place of purpose and from a place of thanksgiving. And that isn't to deny the harder realities of our life, but it is to really operate from a place of, how is it that I choose to be in the midst of the mess that I may find myself in the midst of my challenges, in the midst of my adversities. And, when it comes to gratitude, often we think, it's easy to be grateful when life's going great. That's an easy gig. But actually, we need to practice gratitude, not just in good times, but in all times. And I've learned throughout my own life, where I've had certainly plenty shares of hardships and heartaches, is that actually when we're operating in the present moment from that place of gratitude, it actually opens up. It gives us access to a whole deeper dimension to our experience of being alive, to our lived experience. And with that, because we're operating with it, we're coming from a different emotional space. It expands our capacity to feel joy. And it expands our capacity and our bandwidth to deal with the challenges that come our way. I'll give you a really, really very current to me right now. Like, I'm living this acutely in this moment right now. So last Friday, my husband, he had flown into Singapore, where I'm currently living, from the United States, where he had been. We have 3 children living in the United States. And he had been over there seeing them. Our youngest son is 16. He had a spring break. And Andrew landed in on Wednesday morning. And on Thursday morning, he found himself not feeling great. I said, let's just check your fever. I honestly would never think to do that, except for the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And he had a fever, so he laid low. On Friday, the fever was higher and he had a cough. I said, why don't you go and check it out? And he was admitted to hospital and tested positive for coronavirus that day, 6 hours later. And he's been in hospital since then, since today is day 5, day 6, and he's been battling a fever with that. And this is a state of it's natural. It is just, I wouldn't be human if I didn't feel some anxiety and some overwhelm about the situation, and I have absolutely felt it. But I shared on my social media channels on Saturday what had happened, that Andrew was in hospital, and I just asked people to send prayers. And I've lived in Singapore for 2 years, but from across the world, because I've lived in the United States and I've lived in Australia. I am Australian. I'm currently living in Singapore. And I was absolutely, I was in tears numerous times on Saturday. My heart just wide open in gratitude for the sense of the friendship and the community and the outpouring of love that was coming into me. And, people were leaving things at our door. I'm actually now in strict quarantine as I talk to you because I'm considered to be, and I am, an infection risk for coronavirus. But I've had a really full heart the last few days with the level of love that has come to me through this period. And that's not to say I haven't felt anxious. I've had numerous moments of feeling anxious and overwhelmed. But in the midst of all of that, so present to the gift of friendship. And I have a wonderful family, that are largely in Australia, but friends from whether they're locally dropping off gift baskets and flowers and chocolate and what have you, but just around the world. And I think that in the midst of sometimes our storms, it's even more important to stop and count our blessings.
Definitely. Wow, this is intense, and it's amazing how people respond when they are not in fear, and when they have compassion and they rise up, and they're not in just survival mode, but they think about other people and how they are feeling, and just being there for them. And by the way, how is your husband?
Thanks for asking. Today, I'm not yet calling it turn the corner, but he's had his 3 temperatures today have all been under the critical fever level. And so I think it's nearly time for me to draw a solid breath and say, I think he's turning the corner. And, I think... it's interesting. I think we have to be so careful, particularly when we're in difficult times, about where we put our attention. And because as human beings, we're all wired with negativity bias, and we're all hardwired with fear. And so we're wired to focus on what's wrong, what's missing, what could go wrong, and to catastrophize and to fear cast the future. Right now, a lot of people looking into the future in the midst of this incredibly disruptive period in the world. And it causes massive anxiety. It can leave us living in the shadow of fear. And, I've had my own income. I do a lot of speaking at conferences, and I facilitate leadership programs, and every event that I was going to speak at has been cancelled. I was due to spend a month in the United States. So suddenly I'm like, I've lost a whole lot of income. There's lots, and me and many, many people. And I recognize there's many people who are going to feel the financial impact of this if they haven't already. However, I think sometimes it's in these times we have to come back to basics and go, what matters most, and to really double down on the spiritual practices that allow us to live from a place of being present to all that we do have, because what we put our attention on expands.
Exactly. I think it's a great moment to do this, and it's so important. And from your perspective of being courageous, being brave as a leader, and I think many of us are leaders even if we don't realize it, because we influence other people. Even in our families, we might be the leaders of the family, and children or spouses might look to us to see how they should react. And I think especially in these moments, it's very important to be courageous. And I love how you explain being courageous, what it means, and what are the characteristics of being courageous. It's such an important thing to do right now. And I believe that gratitude is very helpful in this regard. But I know that you have other parts of what it means to be courageous. So could you share those parts with us?
Yeah. Well, I think part of that is also embracing our vulnerability. And I think it's not about being strong all the time. I'll say that. It's not about always, it's not about being tough. It's not about always being, yep, hard, I got it, nothing bends us. It's also being able to sit with the really uncomfortable emotions and being able to feel the hard emotions and recognizing as human beings, we emote before we reason. So we feel emotions will rise up in us before we can even logically think things through. Sometimes we'll just find ourselves feeling very jealous, or maybe malicious, or maybe rejected, or maybe we'll be feeling just really hurt or offended, even though intellectually we may understand it, be able to, intellectually, rationally explain, well, it's there's a reason I wasn't invited to that because they don't even know me, but we might still be feeling hurt that we weren't included. And so just recognizing that we are emotional creatures and none of us are immune to those emotions that can pull us down and can bend us out of shape, and fear included among that. No one is immune to fear or self-doubt or misgivings or moments of worrying about, whether they're going to be exposed as a fraud, an imposter. I wrote about that in my new book, You've Got This, because so many people can struggle with, when will people realize I don't know as much as they think, I'm not as deserving as they think, I'm not as worthy as they think, I'm not as smart as they think. And we can live our lives with this lingering sense of inadequacy. And in fact, many women, that's why, a lot of the work I do is with women, because my experience is, as a woman, as a mother, that we women can be so hard on ourselves. We can be our own harshest critics. We can also struggle to really internalize our strengths, to really own our worthiness. And we can be absolutely brilliant, outstanding at honing in and focusing on all of our flaws and our faults and where we haven't quite nailed it or we haven't done it good enough. And where this perfectionism can be just this burden. It's like, oh, I know people give us a compliment and we can't even take the compliment because we're like, oh, no, but I could have done it better, or thank you, but this part wasn't very good, and we talk ourselves down, and we struggle sometimes to just own, thank you. Yes, I did do a great job. Yes, it is terrific. Thank you. I do look great, whatever. We often no, let's draw attention to the inadequacies or our perceived inadequacies. And that in itself isn't being grateful for ourselves, being grateful for our bodies, being grateful for our opportunities, being grateful for our beauty, being grateful for our talents and our skills and our knowledge and all that we have, all the value that we can bring to people around us when we're talking ourselves down. And my friend Marianne Williamson, I interviewed her for my Live Brave podcast. I've done that a couple of times now, and I was with her last year in New York, and she'd given me her time. She's so gracious. And I said, thank you so much for your time. It's so generous of you. I'm so honored. I said, of course, I'm not Oprah. I'm not going to be able to share it. Not that many people are going to hear it. And she's just said, Margie, stop it. She admonished me. She said, there is nothing holy in diminishing yourself. Does Oprah have 4 children? Has Oprah lived around the world? And I kind of was funny because there I was making negative comparisons to me with Oprah. And she wouldn't take a bar of it. Don't talk yourself down, but I think we're not living in gratitude for who we are when we're stuck in negative comparisons. And when we're making those negative comparisons with other people, whether it be Oprah, which is a pretty high yardstick to compare myself to, or anyone. And so just to everyone listening, there is nothing holy in diminishing yourself. And I think we just have to, and it's not about being arrogant, and it's not about being conceited. It's about just being fully present to the gifts that we have, to the gift that we are, to the strengths that we have, and really living from that place. And I think when we're living from that place, we are living our lives in a powerful way, and from that place of gratitude, from that place of sufficiency. I am enough, and I have, doesn't mean we're not working to better ourselves and be the best person we can be, but it means that we're not honing in and operating from a place of inadequacy.
Exactly. I love this idea, and I think it's so powerful, because if we think about it and we take it to the extremes, even Oprah can compare herself with different guests that she has, and can feel inferior, can feel that she hasn't done enough, or she isn't enough, because this goes on forever. And our skills and the things that we the things that we know and the qualities that we have are unique. And I have my qualities, you have your qualities, our listeners have their qualities. Of course, if we compare our worst defects with other people's qualities, the best that they got, we will feel bad. We will feel that we are not enough, and that can go like it doesn't matter where you are, you can still do that. And I think that can be very helpful for us to have that perspective that actually it's not about getting to perfection, because that's not real. And even those that are at their highest level can still do this, can still compare with other people and still feel inferior, or that they didn't do enough, or that they're not enough compared to other people. And I think that's very interesting. And I love your point. It's so powerful when we are able to own our qualities and to focus on them, because especially in these times when things are hard, we tend to focus much more on those things outside of us that seem bigger and stronger, that we feel we can't actually deal with. And when we see our qualities and the things that we can do about the situation, we get empowered, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think it's really about where we're putting our attention, and recognizing we're all going to fall down into a self-pity mode at times, or into a blame mode at times, or it's not fair, and what don't I have, what isn't right, what should be different, what should I have more of, and to live in this place of what's missing. In fact, I think that's where we're naturally default hardwired to go, to live from a place of what's missing. Oh, well, what's missing is that, I'm not getting the opportunities I want with work. What's missing is that, people don't appreciate me enough. What's missing is, I don't have enough money, or my parents, didn't raise me well enough, or my education's missing, or my kids aren't as good as they should be, or whatever. And we can live our lives in that place of what's missing. I don't have the perfect body. That's what's missing. And yet if we live from a place of what's present, what do we have? What are we surrounded by? My dad has been a beautiful role model for me for that. My father milked cows for 50 years. He finished school at 16, milked cows his whole life, made very, very little money. It was enough to raise us children but has financially doesn't have a lot of money, lives in a very simple house nearby where he has lived his whole life. And he often says, oh, Margie, I'm the richest man in all the world. And he just feels, oh, he's so blessed, and he's 84 and he's in good health, and just he focuses on the fact that he's alive. He'll often say, oh, it's good to be alive, and I've got your mother, and and I've got children, and I've got a view, and he lives near a lake, and he looks at the lake, and whatever the weather is, he thinks the weather's the best weather that day. Great windy cold day, or it's a beautiful sunny day, whatever the weather is, it's the best weather. And I just think it's a beautiful way to approach life.
Definitely. And I think when we
compare this to a person that might have everything that we think of as success and might not feel this way. At least I would go for the state in which your father is living. And I think as long as we are fulfilled, it doesn't matter if we are successful in the eyes of others, as long as we feel fulfilled and feel happy. And I think that's such a wonderful perspective on life that he has. I think it's amazing. Like it's gratitude embodied.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I think it probably is why he is so healthy too. He doesn't complain about his lot. He just is really present to all the good. And yes, I've met many people who financially are quite wealthy, yet they don't live a wealthy life. In fact, they live in a state of poverty thinking, because they're always scared about how they're going to lose their wealth, that someone's going to swindle them from their millions, and I think, there you are, you have all this money, but you actually are not living in freedom. You're living in fear. And I'm sure you enjoy going out on your beautiful yacht, but so much of their our emotions, the quality of our life is proportional to the quality of our emotions. And so if you live in a little simple dwelling, but you feel so grateful for that dwelling, then you're rich. And if you live in a 10,000 square foot mansion, but you're stressed out and you've got a lack of harmony and love in your relationships, then, really, is that really, what kind of quality of life is that? And that's not to say, I'm not trying to say, oh, it's great to be poor, to not have money and, no, it's great having money. It's wonderful. It gives us choices, and that's terrific. But I think we have to be careful, because actually we know from research that after a certain level of income, actually it's very minimal incremental return on happiness. And so often it's our comparisons that leave us unhappy and take us out of gratitude. People don't mind that they got a 10% pay increase until they discover everyone else in the department got a 20%. So it's the comparison. It's not how much we have. It's how we feel about what we have compared to our neighbor and our neighbor over here. And, having traveled a lot in third world countries, I meet people and they can be so happy and they have so little, but they're not focused on, they're not comparing themselves to living in a big house with air conditioning. They're just happy to have a meal, enough food for their children, and enjoy the company of their neighbors at night. So I think it really is about what we put our attention on and avoiding getting caught into these negative comparisons.
Exactly. And I think this is a great perspective, especially in these times when most probably for many of us, our incomes lower, maybe different sources of income just disappear overnight. It's important to have this perspective and to know that your happiness and the way you enjoy life isn't related as much to how much you are earning. It's much more of what you're able to feel and how fulfilled you are able to feel. And I'm sure that, and I believe this with all my heart, that we will get back, we will bounce back, we will bounce back maybe even stronger and even happier after this period. And the way we do it is going to be one way or another, depending on how we relate to this period right now and what we choose to see and what we choose to experience. If we choose to experience more courage, more gratitude, we will find those solutions to make life even better after this is all done.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I am a huge believer. I just wrote an article in Forbes the other day. I was quoting Maria Rainer Wilke, and do not squander the hour of your pain. And I think right now, in the midst of our pain, my personal pain, I have 3 children 10,000 miles from me. I have a husband in hospital right now, unwell. Financially hit like many people, there's pain, all of that stuff. But for me, it only it just cements my resolve to make good from this. I want to make sure when I look back on this period, I go, man, my life is richer and better off because I went through that storm. And I am so determined to making good through and in the midst of this hour of pain, in the midst of this storm. And I think when we approach life that way, how can we find good in the bad situations? It allows us, I think it expands our vision. It stops us focusing on all the doors that have closed and allows us to look at what are the doors that are opening and how can what doors can I open here? What can I do here to make something good of this? And I think one of the simple things all of us can do is reaching out and being a good friend and a good neighbor and a good citizen and lifting up people around you, getting the focus off yourself. And I think doing that is good for the heart, good for the soul, and allows everyone to really experience the magic of community.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this crisis is that even though there's social distances, it's bringing us together. Like I feel more connected to my family, to friends, to people in the community than I felt before, and that's very interesting for me. And I think we will see this in a very different way when this will all be over. And I'm sure that if we adapt and we find solutions, we will find ways to make this an opportunity and something that we will look back to as a blessing.
Yeah. You know, I that's how I approach life. I wrote about my brother's death in You've Got This, and there was no way you could sum up when it was really very sad, my brother, and he died. He took his life after a long battle with schizophrenia. And I remember in the weeks following his death, just writing in my journal and writing to God, you know, what good can come of this? Like, what good can come of this tragedy, of this young life brimming with so much potential that ended so soon with so much suffering? And you know, I came out of it with what good can come of this is me making sure I make the very most of my gifts and my blessings and my mental health and mental wellness, and being present to honoring the life that he didn't live. And I think for all of us, we can frame things in ways where we can find good in things and make good from difficult situations. And so to everyone listening, whatever you're struggling with right now, and all of us have our different struggles, that's just what it is to be human, but to just ask yourself, you know, how can I find good in this? And how can I make good from this? And how can I show up in this moment in a place standing in gratitude for what I have and living with courage, being brave in who we are and how we embrace our challenges, embrace our vulnerability, but also rise above our fears, feel them, step through them, and refuse to surrender our power to them.
Exactly. Oh, thank you so much. I think this is a wonderful ending to our time together. I really appreciate your time and the fact that you were here with us in these challenging times for us as a society and for you personally. Let us know where people can read You've Got This, and when will it come out?
Well, I mean, it is out. It's already out in Australia, and I think it's already shipping in the United States. People can order it on, obviously, Amazon, Book Depository. I know they do free international shipping. It's everywhere. If you just Google my name and Google You've Got This. I have all the details on my website, margiewarrell.com. But yes, it's available online, and it's also available in bookstores. But I appreciate at this moment in time, as you and I are speaking, most people, I think a lot of bookstores are closed and people aren't in bookstores. So I just encourage people to order a copy, and it'll be on Audible and ebook as well.
Awesome. It's a great opportunity for us to take the time to read great books like yours and to get inspired. I think it's a great time for this, and we can, if we choose to, use it wisely, and to better ourselves and to get stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's how we have to approach this moment in time. And it's my hope and my prayer that people will emerge out the other side of this more connected to themselves and their innate capacity to deal with life's challenges, and more connected to the humanity in others. If ever this teaches us that we are one big global family, we are not separated by borders, by race, by religion. We are really, ultimately, there's so much more that bonds us than divides us. And this is a time to really live from that place.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think indeed it's a moment for unity, and I think this unites us beautifully. Thank you so much once again. I'll be putting the links to the book and also to your website in the description of this episode. I really, really appreciate your time and all of the wonderful things that you've shared with us. Thank you, Margie.
Oh, my pleasure. You take care.
Hey, Gratitude Seeker, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this interview. I really appreciate it. And if you could think of one person that would also benefit from it, share it with them. It might actually be the inspiration that they need to make their day or maybe even their life much better. Thank you so much once again. This has been Georgian Benta. Don't forget to keep seeking and spreading gratitude.